Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to BRAP. It's Wednesday, and we are back from the holiday. Hopefully, everyone had a great holiday, and hopefully, everyone scored some goodies on Black Friday. I actually did not go out shopping this Black Friday. I haven't gone shopping in quite some time, actually. Now, I just typically just buy stuff online for the most part, but. Anyhow, it's great to be back, though. You've got a couple topics to talk about today. Not a lot of I would say it's a crazy week in terms of gaming news, but definitely some news out there. Some new game releases that are coming out this week. Callisto Protocol is actually one of the games that is coming out. I think on Friday, if I'm not mistaken. I've seen a couple commercials running for that game. Didn't know that Sony actually had about 153, I believe, of their developers actually lend a hand in developing that game. So, but then, if you've seen some of the commercials on TV, they're definitely closely branded or aligned, I should say, with PlayStation. And just saw a couple of those commercials running this weekend on TV. I was watching football this Sunday, actually. So, but anyhow, we got Hamp with us. Hamp, I don't know if you're there. I know you were getting set up when you jumped in, but are you there, Hamp? No, Hamp's not there yet. Hamp will be back here shortly. So, by the way, everyone, do me a favor. Hit the like button. And if you haven't done so already, do me a solid and retweet the link on your favorite social media platform. Let everyone know that we're live. So, so look, some gaming-related news as it relates to new releases. I mentioned Callisto Protocol's coming out. The reviews release date, the day that the game releases. Look, I think it looks like a good game. Going to be interested to see what read some of the reviews and see what the reviewers have to say about this game. But I think it looks pretty interesting. I'm sorry, I'm multitasking right now, as Brad typically does. I'm watching AEW, watching Steven Regal being carted out after getting sucker punched by MJF. And by the way, if you are a wrestling fan, and we talked about this on this channel a little bit, look, the whole thing between CM Punk and the Elite, look, clearly it's a work because the Elite's back. So I think it's only a matter of time before CM Punk comes back. This thing's a work. I think they're trying to blur the lines between reality and using social media to drive that, which is great, I think, because it's a different twist. It's a little, different twist to what we typically see with, professional wrestling, where and I think that was kind of the mystique of professional wrestling before the internet, that a lot of the times you thought that many of the things that happened were kind of real. But anyhow, see, I was just watching that, Steven Regal being punched by MJF. So so Striking Distance Studios is behind Callisto Protocol, which is for those who don't know, it's directed by Glenn Schofield, who had previously co-created the Dead Space series, which Dead Space is actually getting a remake, which I think the Dead Space remake looks pretty good too. But Callisto Protocol is very much in the same vein of Dead Space, utilizing Slow-Mo's favorite engine, which is the Unreal Engine 5. But I like for what I've seen from it so far. I mean, it looks interesting. Now look, the 2 hours of Callisto Protocol gameplay did leak, and so let me actually, December 2nd's release date. Now there's been a little bit of conversation around the season pass. Striking Distance did announce that the game will be selling a number of death animations post-launch DLC. And some people weren't necessarily, thrilled about that. Studio founder Glenn Schofield did confirm this on Twitter, that development on this stuff really hasn't begun, and the game's as the game release approaches. And he's saying that the reaction of player demand for gorier executions and gnarly he said there's a demand for, like gorier executions and gnarly violence, as he said. So, yeah. So I'm kind of like, this is going to be a game where I kind of want to see what the reviews are going to say about this game, because I did finally finish up God of War Ragnarok, at least the main campaign, and I have some thoughts on God of War Ragnarok, which I'll share in a little bit, but yeah, some people don't like the season passes, the online passes, or on disc DLC. Some people feel like that's kind of taking consumers for a ride. I don't. Honestly, I feel like look, if you really want it, you'll buy it. I think if it's nothing that's super egregious, like a pay to win type situation, I don't really have an issue with it, but some others do. So, all right. So that game's coming out on December 2nd, this Friday. So what's up, Darcia? Great to see you. Let me see here. What other game is coming out this week? There's a lot of stuff coming out. I think Marvel Midnight Suns is also coming out too. When is that game coming out? Marvel. Oh, that game comes out December 2nd too. Now, Marvel Midnight Suns, if you haven't been keeping track, let me just pull this up real quick. I'm going to pull up the Metacritic here, because I was actually surprised by some of the reviews. Oh, no, let's not go to the PC reviews. Go to PlayStation 5. No, PlayStation 5 reviews. Where's the... All right, on Metacritic right now, the Metascore is 83 for this game. Now, when I first saw this game, it wasn't like really resonating with me when they first showed it off, but it's got some good reviews. Let's see if I can pull up. Go to OpenCritic here. Here we go. OpenCritic. All right, so an OpenCritic is actually an 83 as well. So 91% of critics recommend it. This is according to OpenCritic, and it's got a top critic average of 83. So, let me see here. So IGN gave it an 8 out of 10. Marvel's Midnight Suns is an exceptional tactical RPG that makes great use of a card game's mechanics to inject variety and unpredictability into its excellent combat. So, Eurogamer recommended it. Great tactical fun, excellent, a sweet-natured superhero dollhouse, is what they said. GameSpot give it 8 out of 10 as well. Marvel's Midnight Suns delivers strong tactical combat scenarios, a fun superhero romp where it's worth putting stock in the power of friendship. So, this game wasn't on my radar. Don't know. I don't know if I'm going to pick it up, though. I've got to watch a couple more. I think I need to watch a couple more videos. Like I said, when they first revealed this game, it just didn't really resonate with me, I guess. Hamp, I am okay, hold on, Hamp. Hamp just DM'd me a couple minutes ago. All right. So, all right. So Midnight Sun. So yeah. So I'm gonna check it out. I mean, I'm gonna check out the videos and see the gameplay videos when the game releases. Maybe it's something I buy. I don't know. We'll see. It just depends. It just depends. But it's got Wolverine in there. Big Wolverine fan. Douglas Berry saying he's seen it at Walmart already. Wow. You tapped out on all this video. Yeah, it's been a I think it's been a pretty good year in gaming. I mean, obviously there's been some delays, but outside of that, I think it's been a pretty solid year in gaming. I don't have any complaints. There's been there's some pretty big games that have that have come out this year. So let me I want to talk about God of War Ragnarok a little bit, because I did finish the main story. Don't worry, I won't be doing anything to spoil it, but look, I would say it's a great adventure. It's well written. Great voice acting. I mean, the voice acting's superb. But there's some issues I have with it, like with the puzzles. I feel like the puzzles sometimes break the immersion of the game. The puzzles get a little boring after a while. Well, McIce, you are walking contradiction. If you feel that way, you're still here. What does it say about you? People make me laugh. I don't know what to tell you, Mixie. It's interesting that you would say that, and then you would still show up to watch the show and drive the algorithm for me. So thank you for that, by the way, because it actually helps me. So that's kind of But no, Douglas Bear, I agree with you. Kind of the puzzle slowed the game down a bit. I agree. Yeah, I would agree with that. It kind of broke the immersion for me a little bit. But I think the other part is the story's so good that there was, when I was so eager to get to the next like cutscene or to the next boss battle to progress the story, that like when those puzzles would come up, it kind of again broke the immersion for me. And then it was kind of the level design, rinse and repeat. It's kind of like you traverse, climb something, figure out how to open something, get there. Then you would battle some enemies, and it was like, and then it was like rinse and repeat again. So I mean, not that it was a bad thing. I mean, because the combat's fun, the combat's great. Like how visceral the combat can be is something that I enjoy. The God of War series or franchise, the one thing that I've always enjoyed. But you still get like those big set pieces that God of War's known for. Apex is saying there's too much talking, puzzles and pacing felt awful. Yeah, the puzzles really kind of did me in Apex. Like I just didn't care for them. Douglas, I think the originals were a lot of fun too, but they had puzzle elements in those original God of War games as well. Now, again, that being said, with the puzzles and kind of just going down a corridor, climbing, or opening another area, running into enemies, rinse and repeat. Like, while that was kind of the low point for the game for me, overall the game is just tremendous. I mean, it is it's great. I mean, I the writing, the story, the adventure, the dynamic between is it my game of the year? So I'll answer that here shortly. I don't think it's my game of the year yet, or my game of the year. Now I am playing the because there's missions that you can do after you beat the game, kind of go back and complete some missions, and there's some other areas that new missions that open up after you complete the game. So I'm going back and doing those things, and I'm actually enjoying that a little bit more for some reason. And maybe that's because I'm not as eager to progress a story and see what happens next. With Atreus and and Odin and I'm kind of just enjoying just kind of exploring and kind of just going at my own pace, I guess. Dark Sea's got a PC coming. So that's kind of like that's where I'm at right now. I'm just like, thinking about I'm sorry. So no, so I'm kind of doing the after the side missions after finishing the game. So and I think I'm enjoying that a little bit more. Now that I got the main story out of the way. And I think because the story was so good, I really was so like at the edge of my seat at times, trying to like wondering what's going to happen with Atreus, what's going to happen with Kratos, what's going to happen with Odin, and it's a well written game. It just really is. The story's really well done. I mean, I can't say that enough. It's some of the best writing, storytelling that I've experienced in a game. Now, is it my game of the year? To answer Doug's question. As of right now, no. Elden Ring is still my game of the year, and I'll tell you why. Now, look, admittedly, I do have some Souls bias because I do love the Souls games. If you've been listening to the podcast for some time, you know that I love the Dark Souls games. Bloodborne's my favorite game. Beat Sekiro twice. Beat Elden Ring twice. And just really enjoy those games. And beat Dark Souls 3. But for me, like the exploration in Elden Ring, I don't. And what Elden Ring did for the Souls franchise, like just to me, just took it to another level. Very similar to what I think God of War 2018 did for the God of War franchise, where it took it like next level. That's what Elden Ring did for the Souls formula or the Souls type games, or the Soulsborne games, and it was just like Doug said, so much freedom in Elden Ring to either progress the story or explore. It was like D&D on steroids too, and so that's where I give it the edge, and I have it as my game of the year right now. Now I could be wrong. I mean, I could change. I mean, well, I should not that I could be wrong, but I could change my mind later on and say, hey, you know what? I'm gonna decide to go with God of War after I finish some of these other tasks that I'm doing in God of War, and I maybe even go for the platinum for God of War, but we'll see. But for right now, it's still Elden Ring. That game just really resonated with me, and like I said, the wow factor for me, just being a Souls fan and playing the other Souls games, and then playing something that's open world and giving you so much freedom, unlike other Souls games, is just impressed. Was really impressive to me, and really just sucked me in. I mean, I was very immersed, entrenched in that experience. So, yeah, no, I agree, Doug. They're both great games. I mean, there's not, and I understand they're different genres, but I would give the edge, the slight edge to Elden Ring still. So we'll see. By the way, for those who don't know, and I don't know how some of you all have been, how long some of you have been gaming, but let me see here. Give me just a sec. All right. I had to retweet the show here. I don't know. Hamp, are you there? I don't know if Hamp's back yet. All right, he may not be back yet. Yeah, so for those who've been gaming a long time, Pong is turning 50 years old. I've been gaming a long time. I'm not as old as Pong, but I was around when Pong was very popular. Um, Pong was one of those games that, I mean, it was basically a table tennis game that Atari put out. I think it came out in 1972. Yeah, that'd be 50 years, 72. I remember it was one of the first like games that I remember playing, and I just remember like my cousins and my dad who bought us an Atari when we were younger, and I just remember everyone playing that, and it being a big kind of a big deal. And then that kind of, I think Pong was probably the one thing that kind of kicked off the excitement, the craze for video games, and the Atari 2600, and after that the arcades. I mean, the arcades were big. I mean, I remember, and we talked about this quite a bit on this show, but I remember going to the arcades, and I remember going to Pizza Hut. And they would have the tabletop, like Galaga Pac-Man arcade cabinets. Like, I remember that, and those were great times. And I remember, like, there would be arcades at the malls, and there'd be all these different arcade cabinets, and you'd go there and, get your quarters and, play some games. And then, who could forget Street Fighter when that came out, and the arcade craze behind Street Fighter? I mean, Street Fighter 2 was just a phenomenon. And then, shortly after that, Mortal Kombat in the arcades. But yeah, I remember that. Good times. Definitely good times. So
it was a time where we weren't wrapped around the axle about whether or not a game ran at 30 or 60 frames per second. It was really, honestly, I mean, it was a time when, strangely enough, I kind of at that outset of the home console gaming market venture, it was strangely about how games were about family, or to a certain extent friendship, where it was really kind of all about the beginning of couch co-op, and how, then and things were kind of that way from the 70s through the through the 90s, and then in kind of the 90s and the early 2000s, you really had, in my opinion, this focus on single player, right, and the single player experience, and how now we kind of see the rise back of this kind of multiplayer focus, going back to the years where EA kind of said it was flipping the switch and saying basically no one was interested in anything if it didn't have multiplayer in it, which we all know isn't true. But where there's definitely a burgeoning a large consumer demand for, those multiplayer games, whether they be co-op, PvP or PvE, that you can go and kind of sit in and live in, for years at a time, where that can kind of be your main, or these gamers to kind of run this circuit, of where they play Destiny 2 for a week or 2 weeks, and then go play COD for a week or 2 weeks, and then go over to Apex Legends, right, or kind of run that circuit. So it's kind of reminiscent, of kind of where it all started as that game kind of turns the corner on age.
Yeah, no, absolutely, man, and yeah, different time, man, and we fast forward to gaming Twitter, and it's, I don't know. Just different, I guess. But yeah, those were great memories for me, Hamp. I mean, I remember waiting in line to play Street Fighter 2 and, putting my quarter down. I got next. I wouldn't say I was really good. I mean, I was okay at Street Fighter 2, but there were some people there that were just nasty. Just nasty at Street Fighter 2. And so, yeah. All right, Hamp. By the way, Hamp, welcome to the show, man. This is probably going to be probably will be on the show. The show will probably be like an hour show, I'm thinking. Because I don't think there's a lot to talk about per se. Give me a sec here, Hamp. Got to pull something up here. All right, Hamp. So I got to ask you a question, man. So, any interest in the Mario movie?
No, not really. I mean, I wasn't interested in that or Sonic or kind of any of those. I was never a big like Mario kind of nostalgia. I don't have that yen for nostalgia that a lot of people in that realm do. So, by the same token, I'm also not bothered by whatever his name's voice is on the thing. Like the way I approach it, and I think I get this from kind of where I come at movies and things from a lot of time spent like in the comic books world. There are, in comics there are those factions of people who are like, if it is not like literally, page, minute by minute, kind of page by page in accordance with, the comic book, then there are people who are outraged. And I never kind of fell into that bucket because I was like, when you, again, just kind of like we do with the gaming industry, right? When you really look at the comic books industry and you really kind of break the industry down and decompose it and start digging into the details and kind of understand how things work within comics and how that market has evolved over time. Creative teams typically come to books, in as a set. So you typically get a writer and an artist and a mix of other people. That's changed over time. Inkers and letterers and things. But typically those, for the most part, that creative team kind of works as a unit, and they typically have the book and the characters, for a period of time. A year, 2 years. Whatever. Some creative teams stay on longer based on how their book is selling, etc. But the point is that the characters change as they go right from creative team to creative team. Even though you have a lot of people who will say, well, it must be like this. I'm like, well, look, man, if I look at these 3 different creative teams and their 3 different runs on the book, the characters were not the same. They each of them puts their own kind of stamp on it.
Yeah.
So the thing, I've always been accommodating of, it doesn't have to be exactly like the book. And so that's the way I feel about Mario. I don't have this personal feeling that like his accent must be, authentic Italian or whatever. I look forward to different artistic interpretations. I mean, that's the reason to transport IP to different mediums, and not expect them to be exactly the same. Now, I have my thresholds of that. Michael Bay destroyed my childhood. I felt that was unnecessary.
Is that a Transformer reference?
That is a Transformer reference. Yeah.
Well, I mean, again, different adaptation on the Transformers. And look, I didn't really hate the Transformers. I thought it was not a bad adaptation of the Transformers. I didn't like how they did with Megatron, but that's another, I don't know.
Yeah, and I mean, and where I have to walk back from being hypocritical about that is, I mean, Hasbro damaged the Transformers, right? I mean, if you look at Gen 0 or Gen 1, like what the original cartoon was like, it was starkly different than the cartoon episodes that came after the movie. And then every iteration of the Transformers since then has been something kind of radically different. So, I mean, again, I think, different people process things different ways depending on their I'm trying to figure out a way to say it without being insulting. Depending how wrapped around the axle they are about, things being consistent over decades of time, but it's not something, that I'm typically wrapped around the axle about.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And that kind of bleeds to the question of, that Chris Pratt is voicing Mario, and at first, like when I heard him speak, I'm like, I don't know, it doesn't sound like Mario, but it's grown on me. I don't have an issue with it now. I think I did a little bit, but I think it's going to be fine. I mean, I think the movie looks entertaining from what I've seen, the clips that I've seen so far. Illumination's behind it. I'm probably, I'm definitely going to go see it in the movies for sure. I'll take the kids to go see it too. But I know there were some people there that felt like Chris Pratt shouldn't be playing Mario. Now I'll say this. I'll take Chris Pratt's Mario over the first Mario movie that had John Leguizamo and I can't pronounce his last name ever.
And Bob Hoskins.
But yeah, Bob Hoskins and Dennis Hopper as King Koopa. So I mean, I'll take this adaptation any day over that. So, but I don't know. I feel like with Chris Pratt, him voicing it, maybe it's a little more relatable to the masses, I guess. And maybe that's why they went that route. But again, I can't say that I'm as, because I've seen some people angry about it. I'm not angry. It's grown on me, and I think it's gonna be a good movie. I hope it's a good movie.
Yeah, I mean, what I'll say about it is the part that I don't understand about it is I don't understand the decision making behind it. Meaning, again, looking at a piece of entertainment and then digging into the details of how the industry works, right? So with films, I think I've talked about it a little bit on the show before. Films don't, in general, for the most part, films don't get funded just because one company bankrolls it, right? Even the studio who owns it, right? The rights. Typically Sony doesn't just say we're going to make this movie and then that's it, right? Films are typically backed by numbers of financial backers who put skin in the game, and for that reason, right? Because you have sometimes companies coming to the table who aren't as deeply steeped, right, in Hollywood in all cases. There's typically a need or a demand as you start to put together a film to try and get it greenlit for what I refer to as a butts in seats actor or actress, right? And that's somebody who gets people into the theater. And so when I talk about Ghost in the Shell as the example, people were angry about Scarlett Johansson being cast as the lead in that. And look, I'm not going to sit here and say that was right for her to be cast and whitewashing and yada yada yada. I get that, but what I will say is the economic reality of it is that if Scarlett Johansson is not cast for that movie, I don't know that movie gets made. That is not the case with a Mario movie, right? Mario has enough entrenched backing behind it as a character IP that I don't know that you needed to put. I mean, maybe there's an argument there that you needed to put kind of a named and known actor behind it, but I don't know that you needed to go with a choice as polarizing as Chris Pratt to get that movie made. I know Pratt's popular. I know he's got the Guardians of the Galaxy, he's got the Jurassic Park thing, and people could say whatever they would say about how well they like him, or there's a lot of Chris Pratt nickelbacking that's going on right now. But the fact of the matter is that the guy gets people in the theaters, right? And he's still popular enough that he's being cast in that way. And in a time when there's no kind of Harrison Ford kind of replacement, right, for action adventure actors cast in films that are made for kind of the mainstream and are not like the dark, gritty, like John Wick kind of stuff. I don't know that there's a lot of Hollywood actors that wear that particular bumper sticker right now. So I mean, I understand why if you're going that route, then he's the pick, but I don't understand the root cause, of you needing to go that route for Mario.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point, Hamp, and I think in part that is probably why they went with Chris Pratt, and there's some other big name actors that are doing voice work. I think Jack Black's in there as well. But I think again, from what I've been seeing from the clips that they've been releasing, it looks like it's going to be maybe potentially a good movie from what I've, at least in my opinion, from what I've seen so far, and I hope it is. But yeah, it comes out March of next year, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see how it turns out. Again, this is not the type of movie that needs to be like ridiculously decomposed and nitpicked. But I will say, it's also weird to me that they cast him opposite of Anya Taylor-Joy, who, just as an actress, I feel like is 99 times the caliber of Chris Pratt, and that just seems like a very weird pairing. That is literally like serving Pabst Blue Ribbon and a $120 bottle of wine at the same meal. So I kind of don't get that. But it'll be interesting to see how that goes. This is an atypical role for her as well. And it seems like, from what I saw from the trailer, that they're playing Princess Peach as the type of kind of grounded, serious character that she kind of typically plays, and so she may be the foil to all the kind of comedic shenanigans that go on around her. But it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah, which you mentioned comedic shenanigans. We saw a little bit of glimpse of that in some of these, in some of the trailer clips that they've shown so far. But if you look at like some of the actors that are playing the roles in voice acting roles in this movie, Charlie Day, who I remember Charlie Day from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, but he's been in other movies. He is playing Luigi, and Jack Black is actually voicing Bowser, and Seth Rogen is actually doing Donkey Kong. So, and they show that scene where Mario fights Donkey Kong, and I thought that was kind of funny. That scene where they're on that like scaffolding or whatever, and I think that's the newest clip they showed when Mario encounters Donkey Kong. He was rooting for Mario, and he's like, "Oh, I got this," and then Donkey Kong just basically like, "No, you don't." So, but no, I again, Hamp, I think it looks like it's gonna be a fun movie. But you're right. I don't think it's also worth going into too much dissecting of this movie. Yeah. So March 2023 is when that movie comes out, and like I said, I'm definitely taking it out to go see the kids, or taking the kids out to go see it. So
yeah, that'll be something we wait to show up on a streaming service.
No taking the kids to the movies for that one then, huh?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah. All right, Hamp. So, Hamp, it never fails, man. Every Black Friday, by the way. Every Black Friday we have, and this is a Twitter reference. Every Black Friday since I've been on Twitter, it's people are always rushing to figure out who won Black Friday. Look, I don't care who wins Black Friday. I don't even think that's relevant. Components like anyone spent too much on Black Friday. I actually did not this year. Last year's a different story, but every year people.
I spent a little cheddar. I haven't looked at the chat. If Mr. More Country is around. Bormore asked me a few weeks ago. He was like, "Hey, have you ever used a Google Pixel phone?" And that is what I picked up on Black Friday. Because this OnePlus 9 that I've been using was just starting to make my eyes bleed. So
was it Bormore like championing the Google Pixel?
He was. So it's been interesting getting a chance to use it. But go ahead. Sorry to interrupt.
No, it's all right, man. So yeah, every Black Friday, man, it never fails, and people on Twitter are looking to figure out who won Black Friday. I think it's really irrelevant. Yeah, but I said he is because I was thinking about Borbor. But somebody posted something. The Xbox Series X dominates Black Friday sales this year. And what they did, Hamp, is they took an article that was citing another article from the Washington Times, but weren't even properly presenting the information in the article. They arrived to dominating Black Friday when the article stated that the Xbox Series X was one of the hot items on Black Friday. Not that the Xbox Series X was dominating Black Friday, but it was one of the hot items of Black Friday. And somehow people on Twitter were saying that the Xbox Series X dominates Black Friday, and this thing literally went around Twitter. And this is the kind of thing that it's kind of it's unfortunate because like we can have some really good conversations around gaming on social media, on Twitter, but this kind of stuff here derails a lot of that. And what's unfortunate, and look, and I've said this, like if you're looking for a podcast that is all about pom-pomming your console of choice, or you're looking for confirmation bias, like you've come to the wrong place. We're not going to do that here, despite what some people may say in the comment section later on after this show wraps up. But we just don't do that. And this thing spread around. Like I was in a big shout out to Mooch. I'm in a Crossfire DM, and somebody was on who frequently is on Crossfire, was like, oh, look at this. We're like, no, like go read the article. Like people aren't reading articles. They aren't thinking about. They aren't looking at like the source, like the. I don't even think that article or the website that this person posted even cited the article. I think they made mention of the article, but probably didn't link it. I think I did a Google search to find it. I could be wrong. That I have to go back, but
no, they mentioned it. Just to point out while we're on that. So,
yeah.
So the article that was quoted was from a site called xputer.com, which is not in any list of like top 100 tech news or gaming news site RSS feeds, which is normally what I go by as an indicator of at least the popularity of a website before I dig into its credibility. This is not like, if I were in an argument with somebody and somebody came at me with this website, I would immediately dismiss them as not bringing me a credible source that I would by any means pay any kind of attention to. On top of that, you talked about before that the article cited the Washington Times. It's actually the Washington Examiner, which again is very kind of low-grade newspaper that I wouldn't, doesn't sell on the national scale of the Washington Post or anything like that.
I think they would hand those out on the Metro for free. Right. No, I'm being serious. I think that's one of the papers. If I recall correctly, like when I used to travel into DC for work, I'd hop on the Metro. There was it was the Examiner, and there was another one. I don't remember. But anyhow, go ahead, Ham.
Right. And then the tweet. Okay, so yeah, that I was mistaken about. I thought the tweet was calling out the Xbox Series S when I noticed that the article was actually talking about the X. But the tweet did call out the X. But yeah, the quote from the original sources: top products purchased on the shipping holiday included the Xbox Series X, toys for a children's cartoon character called Bluey, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, drones, and MacBook computers. Most shoppers bought an average of 2 to 3 items per purchase. Now, none of that qualitative statement includes any kind of metrics. So, I don't think that. So these are not based. Nothing that was quoted in the original article is based on actuals. It's all based on estimates. And then this quote about top products purchased, again, it's unclear whether the grammar of that sentence means that they were the products that were purchased the most, or if they are highly reviewed or highly regarded products that were purchased. And again, there's no metrics and there's no indication what that's based on.
I was trying to figure out what does hot mean? Like, is it like top selling? Like hot on Amazon? Like, yeah. That's and there was no clarification on that, and that was kind of why I was like, well, how are people drawn to this conclusion that the Xbox Series X outsold or was the top selling or won Black Friday? And that's the unfortunate thing. It's, yeah, it's a head scratcher, Hamp.
Yeah, and there's some other kind of journalistic problems with this article. It made me feel like maybe it's written by like an intern. They talk about shoppers opted to use the buy now, pay later payment option 78% more often than the week before Black Friday, increasing the service's revenue by 81%. I don't know what service they're talking about. I don't know if they're talking about specifically the buy now, pay later option that say is used, by PayPal, but increasing the service's revenue would seem to be a statement that is talking about a specific, somewhere where you could specifically collect costs and revenue against actuals. So I can't tell if that's about a company or a card or a specific retail outlet. And all the references cited before are all kind of marketing organizations that collect analytics for commercial entities. So the article's a little bit all over the place. So anyway, okay, later on it mentions PayPal. So I would have normally mentioned PayPal first and then referred to PayPal's revenue, so that there's a subject to the whole paragraph. But I think they're talking about PayPal's buy now, pay later system. But again, that's obviously that doesn't account for purchases at retail in most cases at brick and mortar. So it's tough to corroborate where some of the comments are coming from. I mean, but the good indicator out of it is, as we went into the Thanksgiving holiday, there was an article by the Wall Street Journal that kind of was predicting a downward slant for retail sales this holiday season, and specifically was talking about low expectations for the video game industry. So it's interesting to see that there were estimates otherwise from some other marketing outlets. It'll be good to hear when we get some actuals collected against the holiday weekend. Both Black Friday and Cyber Monday, to kind of hear how consumer spending was going.
Yeah, so Capoto's like, can Microsoft have this one W, or y'all think the data is not good?
Yeah, I mean, no, they can't. Capoto. And look, the reason is it's not because it's Microsoft. It could have also been Sony. The real point here is that, again, this is, I guess, our diffusing of uncorroborated information and backyard wrestling level websites pointing to a ragtag level of newspaper as some indicator of what's actually going on the American economy. That's the thing that I have a problem with. The problem I have is this is the type of thing that leads to, right, rumors like Amazon is buying EA Games suddenly becoming a wildfire within literally 45 minutes, the morning of a work day on Twitter, right? Because it came from a totally uncorroborated source. So the topic is not really about, Xbox or Sony or Nintendo, because quite frankly, I would expect Nintendo came out of the weekend, right, with the really high sales numbers. It's about the way the gamer community, against at least my best wishes, quickly gloms onto kind of some of these tabloid level sensationalist kind of bylines, and then amplifies them and repeats them and echoes them, and then uses them as, attempts to use them as objective quality evidence for, whatever narrative that they're spewing at the time. And that's the problem I have.
Yeah, and that's the issue at hand. It's that people are taking, first of all, they're not even representing articles correctly. They're coming to a conclusion that one that the article didn't even come to a conclusion with, and using an article that's I agree with you, it wasn't really well written at all. I think that it's really odd to me how people are like the mental gymnastics that people do over like console sales or where the market's going, like, oh, like I see people, and I'm not picking on you, Gogol Po, but like people will say, oh, I saw a stack of PS5s or they're not selling well. I saw a stack of Series X. That means they're not selling well. And it's like, if you want to get an idea of kind of how these consoles, if it really matters to you, if you want to get an idea how these consoles stack up against each other in retail, just go back and look at like the NPD numbers, and you can kind of get an idea. You could probably establish some kind of trend. And we see this. Like I remember saying this a couple months ago, and people were upset that I said this, but I said, look, when Microsoft is clearly, and I wasn't the only one that said that. I mean, this is Matt Piscatella, NPD, who was saying this too. Matt's tracking the data and looking at the numbers and everything, and he said, look, whoever, and he wasn't specific to Microsoft or Sony or Nintendo. He said, look, whoever of the big three can get product on the retail shelves is going to sell the most consoles. And what we saw,
whoever won the fight of Black Friday is almost entirely dependent on who had the most consoles on store shelves to be purchased.
Exactly, and that's not an indicator of any kind of decline by, let's say, Sony or Nintendo. It's just a matter of, look, if whoever can get inventory out and shelves and people can get it there, they're going to buy it. And we saw this trend too. And again, I said this a long time ago. I was like, because people are like, oh, Xbox Series X and Xbox Series S, the Xbox is back, they're outselling PlayStation. I'm like, look, it's great they're selling, and hats off to Microsoft for putting out a better product this generation they did last generation. Because I think, having the Series, yes, and I know people kind of poo-poo on that console. I thought that was and I kind of poo-pooed in the beginning, but now looking back at it, I'm like, that's actually a good idea, because and we see it. We see that 45% of people who have bought an Xbox Series S are new to the Xbox ecosystem. So Microsoft putting out that console allowed them to get newer people into that ecosystem that weren't there last console generation. But the thing with when the Xbox was outselling PlayStation, we all knew about the supply constraints. But if you go back to what Matt was saying, and he was saying, look, whoever can get their consoles on, can have stock readily available for consumers to buy, that's the console that's going to end up selling the most. And what we did see prior to that supply, that shortage pre-pandemic, because the consoles launched during the pandemic, but when one thing we noticed when Sony was able to get enough Sony PlayStation 5s out on retail shelves, they were consistently outselling the competition. And now that Sony's kind of been able to ramp up their production and get more PlayStations out there, we're seeing that same effect, that same trend. So you can go back and look at previous trends, and that's probably a better way to do it, I think. Look at these previous trends and kind of make I would say, an educated guess on what you might see in terms of sales, if it matters to you, comparing which console is going to sell the most. So yeah. I
mean, I do have to say, in no other generation before this one has number of consoles sold been a potentially less relevant number to the discussion, particularly with the data that's available, and a lot of the data isn't. We don't know what Microsoft's distribution of Series X versus Series S's is. So even when you're comparing total console numbers, it's hard to draw relevance out of that. And of course, the Microsoft strategy is obviously oriented around an ecosystem play, a platform play, and I think comparing those numbers of consoles sold directly against Sony's PS5 sold, I don't know how much water that particular bucket holds.
Yeah. Yeah. So hey, have you? I haven't seen anything. I'm curious because with the looming recession, Have you heard anything about? I mean, I haven't seen anything yet come out about retail numbers for Black Friday, but I'm really interested to see how, there has been an economic slowdown. I'm just curious to see how what the impact of that might be on Black Friday. Have you seen anything yet?
I have not seen anything yet. That's again, actual numbers. I saw, I've seen, different opinions and perspectives, with on predictions. That being said, I also didn't come out of the week. I had lots of other things going on coming out of the weekend, so I haven't had a chance to really go digging for that. It might be out there somewhere. But I'm not sure at this point.
Yeah, no, I'd be interested to see again, kind of what, of consumer spending, how that compares to the last Black Friday, because again, there's there's a lot of talk of the pending recession and economic slowdown. So yeah, that's going to be. I'm curious to see that. Capone's saying I think NVIDIA was surprised how well the 4090 is selling. Capone, was there an article about that? I'm just curious. I think I may have read something like that on Twitter as well. I think earlier today, but I don't remember.
It's definitely. I mean, just in terms of the signal that's out there of how many times I'm seeing the 4090 being mentioned. I will say one thing that's weird, and again, I wouldn't extrapolate some huge deterministic result of this. I think it's purely anecdotal, but it is interesting that there's a lot more conversation about that particular card, far more so than the 3090. Now, I completely get and understand that that's because that's the only card that they've put out, and so it kind of stands alone by itself. But it's just hugely interesting that having that be the release tact that they've taken this time, that there's suddenly more interest in the 4090, because that card, right, is being sold alongside the 3000 series cards, at least until they get through inventory. Now, I've seen inklings that that they may have hit that point where a lot of those 3000 series cards are out of certain channels of inventory, and so therefore we might start seeing the other parts of the 4000 series lineup here. I would have assumed, regardless, that we probably would have seen that as we turn the corner into next year and we started going into things like CES, and in that time period of the year where commercial vendors will try and get product on shelves as people are getting their tax return checks. It'll just be interesting to kind of see how that goes down. I know I've made mention before of my intention of going after a 4090, but just over these last few weeks, I think I'm backing off of that claim, and I think this will just kind of be the way I used to historically approach these generations, where the 4000 series will be a generation that I skip, since I've got 3000 series cards. But we'll see. Definitely interested to kind of see the benchmarks that come out of these things, both synthetic, just to get that thumb in the wind indication, but then also kind of real world gaming performance.
Yeah. By the way, hey, I'm totally unrelated, but I am looking for an open source software engineer. Just throwing that out there.
Are you saying that for the purposes of the chat?
Yeah, hit me up. Anybody with Kubernetes experience would be a plus. Yeah, I've been told that's a purple squirrel ham.
You'll have to explain that one to me. I'm not familiar with that term.
All right, yeah, I'll explain it to you. It has to do with oh my god, containers and some. I don't know. It's
no. I mean, I absolutely know what Kubernetes is. I'm not familiar with the term purple squirrel. Is that just that's just super rare on the market?
That it's hard to find. Yeah, it's not going to be easy skill set to find. So,
yeah, I think I don't know. That's Well, we can definitely talk about that.
Yeah, but I got to throw that out there. I know it's totally random. I didn't mean to derail the conversation, but yeah. So where were we, Hap? We're talking about the 4090s. I forgot.
Yeah, just kind of the volume of conversation that there is out there. Now again, that's I feel like a lot of that is that dynamic of, when there isn't anything else for you to talk about, right? The thing that is out there is the thing to talk about, which we quite often see, right, in the news cycle, in the gaming community. So,
Yeah,
but
the thing that I keep seeing is that the damn Microsoft acquisition of Activision, and I'm just tired of it. Tired. That keeps coming up.
yeah, I would definitely agree on that.
Yeah, it's just like, just just come on, let the deal happen already, or something happen. But there's, yeah, I'm over it now at this point. But I keep seeing it out there. It's kind of like, there's that report now that Microsoft it's going to to offer EU regulators some kind of concessions for the active. They're trying to ease the fears of the EU and stuff like that. And then people are doing these deep dive analysis. I'm kind of like, you know what? Let nature take its course, and we'll find out what happens, and that's it.
Yeah, and again, that's kind of what you would expect. Hey, and Capone, I mean, I had a guess at what BRAP meant, but I just didn't want to be presumptuous that I completely understood what that term meant. But yeah, I mean, but again, we've been saying for a very long time that one of the tactics that is frequently taken with this is that when you do know that a regulatory agency is kind of dancing on the fence about not approving your deal, that it's prudent to get out in front of it, right, and put something in front of them that it seems likely that they would bite on, rather than let them go off and concoct some set of concessions that they want you to make. And of course we saw, I think we saw, correspondence or indication that, Microsoft chose not to do that with the CMA because they felt it was too much of a guessing game, right? They weren't certain what the CMA was going to expect. They may have more confidence, right, with the EU Commission, which could also definitely be, as I mentioned before, like so many of these things come down to this conversation with my boss today. So many of these things come down to personalities, right, and people who know, people who are known entities and people who are not. And one of the things that I also keep talking about with regards to the CMA, and why I kind of have an expectation for them to kind of come over the top and have some kind of draconian concessions that they want made, is because, up until now, for years, the CMA has been, subordinate to the EU Regulatory Commission, right? And that there's a certain air of them having something to prove. There's a certain air of them showing that they've got their own big boy pants on, and that they're gonna now arbitrate this topic as a standalone entity, where their word is the law of the land, so to speak. And so I think there's definitely more of a scent around them about having something to prove. But that also makes that particular situation, I can understand and see that would make that situation less predictable, right? Whereas, Microsoft obviously has interfaced with the EU Commission multiple times, right, over the last 2 decades, about mergers and acquisitions, and would probably have more of a sense of, what types of things they would find acceptable, sufficient enough for them to be willing to, put a package together, and kind of sit down with them and have a talk over what some of those things might be.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Hamp, hold on a sec here. Bobby Jackson actually said, according to NPR, this year's Black Friday sales were $9.2 billion compared to last year of $8.92.
Yeah, I think, and I haven't done the math on that, but I thought I had seen, other places, like including in that Washington Examiner article that talked about the lift being like 2.3% more than last year's retail.
Which is interesting, because if that's true, I mean, that's again, look, I'm not an economist by any stretch of the imagination. I play one on TV, but like I Darkseid is saying inflation.
Well, I think one of the things that you have going on is so again, this is so now we're talking general retail right now, right? We're not talking specifically video games. But one of the things that's going on is I felt like last year you still had a lot of trepidation about people going out in crowds. Um, and we were still kind of going through the vestiges of trying to get everyone vaccinated. So I think there was still kind of a pullback kind of dynamic to retail sales last year. Also, that number is obviously very heavily laden by brick and mortar retail sales, and may not be fully incorporate all the digital sales that have gone on. So, so you probably definitely had more people out this year. You also had stores that weren't fully open at this point last year, and you still had stores that weren't fully staffed. As far as number of employees that they had working, but I would expect that this year, we would have seen a return to pre-pandemic normalcy, just in terms of the trend that we were starting to see of, like, Great Scott, man, like Black Friday actually starting on Thanksgiving Day, and stores actually going open at like 6 p.m. On Thanksgiving Day.
I mean, so last year, I mean, I went out to GameStop, and they were open on Thanksgiving. I got a second PlayStation 5 that ended up selling, but I again, I mean, my take on this real quick, Camp, before I forget, because I will, with Darkseid's comment about inflation, I would look at inflation as something that would actually drive that number down and make it less than last year. We always hear about how, we always hear about how evil Sony's and increasing prices, and there's people struggling to put food on the table and pay for gas. But I'm not laughing at people struggling to put food on the table, by the way. I'm just laughing that someone actually made that comment. But I would think it's the other thing, that inflation would have the opposite effect, and actually would hurt retail numbers, or that that dollar amount, because people aren't going out. But again, and this is a totally anecdotal, Hamp, but when I go out, man, I mean, I went out for the World Cup, man. I mean, restaurants are packed. Walmart is packed always. And again, I don't know, man. Like, I could be wrong, but I just feel like I feel like I've been waiting for a recession since July. And obviously there's definitely has been economic slowdown. Like, I'm not saying there hasn't been. We've seen it in gaming, but I also feel like we're coming from a very high too. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think for me, from my perspective, there's a lot of weirdisms kind of associated with Black Friday that I'm not ready personally to, like, tether, extrapolate from that indicator a lot of kind of what we're looking at for the future. I think very small butterfly effect things, like just the fact that it was warmer this year, right? Like, I went out it wasn't Black Friday, but I went out and stood in line for the Nintendo Wii launch, and we stayed in our cars. Like, we went around and took names down on a clipboard, and we were like, "This is the line." And when the store actually opens, nobody wants to be outside freezing, and that was in October, right? So just the fact that it's warmer this year, right, gets more people out. I think another key thing that could be a big driver is actually that I think that I would expect that there would have been more product on shelves this year, for certain commercial categories. That easing of supply chain problems, and again, we're seeing some of those start to come back with the reports of what's going on over in China. But at least for a time period, I think there's been a time period where there was a buff to supply chain inventory and what stores may have had on hand, even with, to a certain extent, some of the consumer electronic luxury products, not just consoles, but Macs and iPhones and things of that nature. So it's tough, but I mean, the cautionary tale is we've definitely had years where Black Friday spending was up, but overall holiday spending, was down. So be interesting to see how it kind of unfolds over the next couple months.
Yeah, that's a great point, man. That's a great point, Hap. Yeah, we'll see. Look, player saying inflation is at 7.7% according to the Federal Reserve. I haven't looked at inflation numbers recently. Let's see here. Have you heard anything about inflation, Hamp? And by the way, sorry, I don't mean to turn this into the inflation podcast, but as we're talking about
no, that's cool. Look, I mean, it's pertinent. Just if you allow me to wrap back right. What Capono was saying is, hey, let Xbox have the win, and I'm not picking on you, Capono, but just talking about the sentiment. And absolutely, it would be great to hear positive news about Xbox. But we would have dunked had somebody been out pom-pomming Sony as well for sales numbers based on an uncorroborated source. But the point is, just like when we were talking about that and that comment, we were talking about it's about a bigger thing. By the same token, right? This discussion, although it's not people's favorite and people don't like things like this, is the economy, inflation, what the Fed is doing, what's going on with the housing market. These impact people who have the most disposable income to go out and spend money on video games, right? A lot of times when we talk about these statistics and the data, there's a lot of heavy focus on, right, kind of the younger demographic and the large numbers, right, that they provide in terms of consumers on the market. However, when you look at distribution of wealth, obviously that skews towards an older demographic, right? And all these things that are going on impact them, and they therefore impact the decisions that companies are making at points in the timeline for things that they're doing. They impact Sony deciding to raise prices on consoles in certain regions. They impact a decision about whether or not people are going to charge more money for video games. So I think all these things are pertinent. I think one of the topics we've been talking over, BRAP, that probably is going to hit the video game industry kind of square in the face if it happens is what's going on with the railroad strike, right? Which is why I keep posting it right on Twitter, so that at least there's half a chance that some people will pay attention, because I feel like that's a thing that is pertinent.
They won't pay attention. They won't pay attention.
I know.
Look, unless you're not out there saying Xbox sucks or Xbox One Black Friday or PlayStation 5's in trouble, they're not going to pay attention. And this is something they should pay attention to, because again, supply chain. If it gets interrupted or there's some kind of interruption to supply chain, that's not good for us. It's not good,
because prices go up, supply becomes more scarce. But yeah, maybe I should say, Microsoft's Xbox is at fault for causing the railroad strike.
Oh, then people are like, wait a minute, what? I need to reach out to Sleepy Joe. I got to figure out what's going on.
That's right, because people like to tweet at POTUS and Lena Khan.
Oh my God! Fuck, that's
maybe they have other things on their mind.
Yeah, apparently Game Pass prevents crime, but
Well, look, before you step in, I mean, I'm glad. Who was the person who made the 7.7%?
That was Player. Yeah, that was actually the inflation did come below the predicted 8% by the Fed for the month of October at 7.7%. So it is down. I mean, it's trending down. So and I did read something today. I think it was on NPR. Or was it? I can't remember now. Maybe it wasn't NPR, but gas prices seem to be down to I think the average is $3.49 or something a gallon now. So it's Yeah,
but I gotta tell you, chicken prices are up, and that feels like a cash grab, and it's anti-consumer. And I think I'm gonna tweet at maybe the FDA chair or something to get on that. But I do mean that seriously. Chicken prices are up.
No, they are up. But Hamp, I mean, they should eat the cost.
That's right. Because there's no damn chip shortage. It's all a hoax.
It's a big hoax, a big lie.
That's right. If you don't understand that integrated circuits actually go into PLCs that drive chicken plants, then that's a thing that you should pull the thread on. But I do want to mention, I actually want to give my hats off. The conversation that's going on in the chat. Look, and BRAP, I don't know if what your own evaluation is of your subscriber numbers and your viewership numbers and stuff like that. But I will say, for me personally, when I look at the conversation that's going on in the chat now, in comparison to the conversation that used to go on in the chat, 6, 7, 8 months ago, in comparison to the types of comments that we get, let me just say I am super impressed by the degree of sophistication of the topics that are being bounced around, some of the comments that are being made. I am really I'm really impressed, and I don't say that to be patronizing. I say that because like people are pointing out things that that I don't know and that I need to go research and take a look at, and kind of cluing me into, oh, I pay attention to a lot of stuff, but I don't specifically look at inflation numbers, right? I wait for them kind of lazily to come across my windshield. I don't go out and get them, and maybe I should. So I do really appreciate that, and even the comments from the last episode are the, I don't know if it was the episode or the rant, but like really impressed by, again, lots of people disagreed with what we said, and this is our point, right? It's people, and the conversation in the gaming community should be one that is elastic enough to allow for disagreement, debating the topic, sticking to the issues, not insulting people's character. And while I say that, there were some comments in the video that I didn't appreciate because they were that type of thing. Instead of just debating and sticking to topic and talking about the issues, people have to try and make comments about character or whether they like us or not, which I could care less about. But I appreciate it, and it's good to see in the chat.
Yeah, no, I definitely see. Yeah, it's improved. I notice it, and what Player was saying something about, hopefully the Federal Reserve keep raising interest rates. They're going to. They're not going to be as aggressive about it. I was reading that earlier today. I think that actually came out where the Federal Reserve is to slow the pace of interest rate hikes. I can't even talk, in December. So what they're saying is Fed Chair Powell is saying that we expect smaller interest rates. And that's the one thing I think my understanding is, what the U.S. has done, if you compare to what we're seeing in Europe, that the U.S. was a little more ahead of the curve in terms of addressing inflation and more aggressive in that regard. Because I remember someone rattling off, and I have to look this up, but I think inflation in the UK at one point was like 18%. So it's high here, but compared to other parts of the world, it's not as bad as it I guess as it could be. So Google post saying protests in China, Ukraine conflict spreading are big concerns. Yeah, I don't disagree there. And actually are leading. My understanding is with the lower gas prices in that we're seeing here, that's those issues in those two countries have led to also a lower demand in oil, demand for oil and energy, which is one of the reasons why we're seeing a drop in gas prices. So that's what I read today. And but to your point, Google Poll, I did read that there's some concerns with China and what that could mean with more COVID outbreaks and them shutting down, supply chain, things like that. So yeah, I don't know what's going on in China, Hamp, but are they not offering vaccines? Like, what's happening? I see people protesting now. And it's I don't know. I've been keeping up with what's happening in China per se, but it almost seems like I just feel like, well, don't they have vaccines? I mean, I don't know. Google Poll is giving us some, Google Poll, we might have to address some of these topics that Google Poll is bringing up. Like, he's like talking about Elon on Twitter wars bigger than people think in terms of control of media and by whom. That's an interesting conversation. That's something we should probably do a rant on, Hamp. Because Eli is an interesting character. I call him Eli. Elon's an interesting character because, and I call him a character because I think he does act like a character. But his his commentary, the people have spoken to let Donald Trump in back on Twitter and referred to as democracy. I'm like, that's not really, no. Yeah. Be curious to see what people actually voted for that and the people that follow Elon Musk. I don't know how much of that is a democracy, but anyhow. Oh my God, Hamp! I was gonna bring. Oh, what's gonna ask you, Hamp, is we had conversation about there was a short clip from Sacred Symbols, Colin Moriarty talking about I think Microsoft's pipeline. Was that the clip? I think that was a clip, right? Hamp is
I apologize, BRAP. I wrote in the chat that I had to step away for a sec. So as I was leaving, so as I was leaving, you were asking a question about what was going on in China, and then as I came back, you were asking a question about Colin's statement. So which one do you want me to comment on?
I don't want to get on the China thing too much, but let's go to Colin. Colin was talking about Microsoft's pipeline and their acquisitions of some of the studios. Like I think he brought up some examples of games that Microsoft didn't make. That they bought, like I think he mentioned like Deathloop, which is a game that was made by Arcane, and Microsoft acquired Bethesda, which means they have Arcane, everything like that. But what was his? Because again, it was only a short clip that someone showed, and I haven't gone back and seen the whole clip. But we were having some dialogue about that in the BRAP DM.
Yeah, and actually, I mean, the dialogue was that I could not, because typically this is what I do when I have time, patience, and tolerance, when people post those clips, as he mentioned in our chat, right, they're always kind of snipped deliberately to feed a narrative, right, or make prop up an ideology, and so they often leave out context, and so. Like I often do, I went to the original episode, which obviously the person didn't actually point to, and tried to scrub through there to find that specific comment, which, that Sacred Circle podcast was like 3 hours and 45 minutes, so I was not able to find it. I think what the actual conversation was what Colin says in the clip is that all of those games were not, in his opinion, were not really due to Microsoft's credit or really anything that they did to make those games happen. But I think if I had found the rest of the context of his statement, I think he was actually saying that as a knock against an argument Sony had made, where they were saying Microsoft doesn't need Call of Duty to compete. They have the capability to put out AAA titles, and maybe cited a bunch of titles. And I think what Colin was actually saying, well, I wouldn't call those titles, things that were representative of Microsoft's capability to compete, because they weren't really due to anything Microsoft actually did, I think, but I'm not absolutely positive because I just wasn't able to find that buried in the video.
Yeah, T-Rock saying Colin's point was they can't take credit for creating those games. They bought them late into production.
So T-Rock, was he saying that about a statement Microsoft had made or a statement that Sony had made, is what I was trying to figure out.
By the way, real quick, totally off topic here, Amp. Top Gun Maverick is re-releasing in movie theaters this Friday. Who asked for that?
It's a cash grab. It's anti-consumer.
Who asked for that, Amp?
That's a scam. Wait, but isn't it the exact same movie that they were just charging less money for last week? Then it's a scam.
Oh my God. Actually, I might go see this. I might go see this in the movie theater, man. I bought it on Amazon Prime, and I watched it on my OLED. I might go to the movie theaters to go see this movie. Who's going to see Top Gun? Who's going to see Top Gun Maverick on Friday? Darkseid says theaters asked for it. Thank you, Darkseid.
I hear that it was a good movie. I have actually not sat down and watched it yet.
I thought, I thought it was okay. It was all right. I don't want to spoil it, but so T-Rock saying kind of both. He's referencing both Sony and Microsoft and accusations and what is it? Accusations and IP. So I guess T-Rock was that related to the ABK merger? Like, is that
I mean, it's definitely the ABK merger, because that was in an hour or so of the 3 hour 45-minute episode. But yeah, T-Rock, I'm not sure if you meant acquisitions in IP or accusations in IP.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. He's saying acquisition. Thank you, T Rock. Yeah, I mean, I I need to listen to the show the entirety to get better idea of to get to listen to the conversation, have a better understand the context of the conversation. I did see people again. When people put out these clips, people just run wild and don't go back and look at the entirety of the show or try to get additional context, understand what Colin's talking about. And Colin's even called people out for doing that, for taking certain clips and kind of presenting them in a way without providing context. But that's Twitter for you. But yeah, I mean, Microsoft really can't. Yeah, they can't. Like, if we're just talking about them taking credit for creating those games, they can't take credit for that. I don't think there's anything wrong saying that.
I guess I actually kind of come down on the other side of that.
Yeah.
Look, I mean, and again, it all depends on the purpose of the conversation. That segment of the show was talking about the business, and so from a business perspective, right, the only thing that I think is relevant is where the revenue went. If the revenue went into Microsoft's bucket, then it's a Microsoft game.
Oh yeah. No, I don't disagree with that, but I'm just saying, like, from the standpoint of can they take credit for actually funding the creation of that game? Well, no. Just like Sony can't take credit for creating, like, Say.com Destiny 2. But you're right, Hamp. From a business standpoint, like, if now that they own and that money's coming in, that's filling Microsoft's coffers, right? That's same thing with Destiny 2.
Right, and I mean, even on the creative side, right? I mean, well, again, this is hugely pertinent, right? I mean, Elon Musk didn't create SpaceLink or whatever, didn't create Tesla, or I don't know if it's SpaceLink or Starlink, and didn't create
Starlink.
Starlink is his satellites. Is his
It's a satellite, right?
Yeah, is his interstellar? Is his I don't even know what to call it. Is his space company SpaceX? Is that the one?
Yeah.
So, I mean, he didn't create any of those. Just like a venture capitalist. Like, look, what's the popular show on Shark Tank, right? I mean, if the multi-billion-dollar person, I don't know that it matters that they created it, right? If they went out and scouted the talent and determined that was a thing that should be in their portfolio and they had the capital means to procure it, then I mean, I don't know that it necessarily matters, I
don't disagree. I don't think it matters. But I guess my only point was if Microsoft did say, like, if they were trying to take credit for that, for creating that, they couldn't, because they didn't. You know what I mean? Like that. Anyhow, I'm sorry, go ahead, man.
Yeah, it's just it's.
But it doesn't matter. I think in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it would. Where that would matter would be an incredibly granular conversation. Now, look, if Matt Booty was coming to me to apply for a job and said, "Yeah, I was the mind behind Deathloop," okay, then I would have umbrage with that statement.
It's my Deathloop. That's my brainchild. What are you talking about? Right, or like Jim Ryan. What are you talking about? Returnal. That's my brainchild. I was Jim Ryan's walking the interview. I was on the shitter, and then all of a sudden I hit my head against the sink, and I saw the flex capacitor, and then I thought of Returnal.
Right. So that clip was used to spark a conversation about, like, who gets credit for what, and then it was the pile on from the other camp. Well, does Sony get credit for Final Fantasy? Blah blah blah. And I'm like, look, the game
that's why I'm sorry. That's why I had a problem with that clip, because it led to that piling on. Like, people started comparing notes and Sony didn't create Final Fantasy 7, stuff like that. So go ahead, man.
Yeah, no, that's all. I was saying the same. Yeah, I was just saying that same point. Like, I don't know what point it matters, right? I mean, Microsoft owns all those Bethesda IPs now, so Does it matter that they were the creative mind behind it? I don't know.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Like, and what I saw coming out of that conversation too, an unfortunate part of that conversation was that, Microsoft's not competing, and no, they are competing. They just because they're not, creating new IP per se or new studios from the ground up doesn't mean they're not creating. They're not competing. I mean, they're buying studios to compete. That is competing, and you mentioned that many times. We've talked about this sample on this show. A lot of the times that Microsoft is competing, but the other thing was, Sony should compete too, and it's like I'm like, well, I'm not sure how Sony's not competing, but it's just weird. It's this weird conversation that happens. It's like one side says the other side's not competing and they should compete, and I'm like, no, both are really competing.
Right.
Albeit they're just doing it in different ways.
Right. What you would expect is you expect competitors to compete based on their strength, right? I don't expect a heavyweight boxer with a long arm reach to stand in toe to toe and try and go short range against Mike Tyson, because that doesn't make any sense.
No, you got to hit him with
right?
like Lennox Lewis. You hit him with the jab.
Yeah. So like, it's just so weird that people are like angry about companies doubling down on what they do best in an effort to compete. Right?
Yeah.
And to be quite frank, I mean,
it's like Aaron Rodgers isn't going to be running bootleg plays like Lamar Jackson. Like it's just Aaron Rodgers is not going to. He's not going to design a game plan around running because that's not his strength.
Right. If the best thing on your team is a fullback, then do you run a West Coast offense? I don't know that makes the most sense. Is a running fullback.
Well, I mean, Gaming Tutor would have you believe that that's the case, that they should run a West Coast offense.
Right. I mean, the thing that I mentioned in chat, right? The thing that we're seeing that I think is good is, it's good that Microsoft woke up, right? It's good that the bear came out of hibernation. It's scary, right? That now the bear is hungry, and now the bear says, "Oh, wait a second, I got a couple $1 trillion here to throw around. So you get a game developer, you get a game developer, you get a game development studio, right?" But I think it's, as somebody who tries to be a student of the industry, enjoys seeing these things go on. It's interesting to see change. My biggest problem with the whole state of affairs was, Sony walking into this generation saying, "Yep, we've been successful the last 2 generations, so we're just going to double down on what we were doing before, and because that's the ticket, right?" And we've brought up the case studies before that lots of companies have gone down that path. Again, companies that eventually saw themselves in much greater dire straits than is anywhere near Sony's competitive position. But the risk is that years down the road that you could wind up there looking at a situation like RIM and like Wang, like IBM, and a lot of those companies, Xerox, a lot of those companies successfully pivoted out of that Seagate. A lot of those companies successfully pivoted out of those positions, but it led to them facing some very stark and dire times that obviously I think as gamers we would prefer that not be the wake up call, right? That Sony would wind up needing. So it's good, even if this merger doesn't go through, right? It's good that it has just shaken up the landscape of the industry. It's forced Sony to kind of rethink their strategy and start reorienting where they were heading. We've been playing we've both been playing God of War Ragnarok. I think you finished it. I've been playing tons of PlayStation Studio games that have gone to PC. I've been having tons of fun playing Miles Morales, Uncharted, yada yada yada. But but as we talked about last week, right? God of War Ragnarok, I think, has led us to ask some questions, right, about game design, and whether or not 3 generations of these PlayStation Studio games that have pretty much become very persistent in their pursuit of the near linear wide path, right, action adventure kind of motif, with a lot of the kind of design trappings that go along with that. Is it time for right some fresher takes and some new innovation from that perspective, and hopefully with a lot of these studio acquisitions, that's what we're going to see, and hopefully as maybe they exhaust a certain vestige of what was in their production pipeline based on these IPs. Maybe it gives them an opportunity to kind of go off and rethink and retinker how some of these things are put together, and whether or not the things we're going to get down the pipeline look a little different.
Yeah, that's a great point, Hap. I mean, somebody in the live chat I think earlier asked, like, is that Sony formula getting too stale? Oh my gosh, I'm seeing a lot. I'm seeing a lot of commercials for Callisto Protocol, by the way. Interesting. And again, this game releases on Friday, but I've been seeing a lot. I'm watching. I have the TV playing on the background while we're podcasting, and I said this earlier when the show started. I've seen quite a few commercials for this game. I'm actually just kind of surprised. And obviously, Sony's got a marketing deal with them, and Sony did help with the development of the game. I think the article came out, they provide about 150 developers to help. So, but there was a question earlier, Hap, like, is that Sony formula, is that kind of becoming stale now? Like, should Sony look at maybe, because they do have that kind of over the shoulder camera, that the character's kind of off center to the left. That's kind of been a hallmark of Sony, for not all first party games, but the Last of Us, the God of War, Horizon Forbidden West. Again, I mean, different. I mean, they're clearly in different settings, different types of stories. Both are great. But is that formula getting kind of old, you think, Hamp?
I've been saying that for several years, and because I've been saying it, I'm trying.
Man, Hap, you're gonna the comment section, man. People gonna.
I get it, but look, the compromise I'm trying to make is because I've been saying it for a long time. I'm trying not to be like a lot of other podcasters and YouTubers that I see that are trying to make this like this is some revelationary statement, right? That now is the time that the tip over point, and I'm like, no, and there's some good and some bad to that. I look at Ubisoft, whether you like what where they ended up with the design is bad, but where they started and where they were at mid game, in my opinion, was good. And one of the things Ubisoft did is they kind of took that third-person action-adventure open world design framework, and I would argue that they kind of perfected it. And they got it to a point where they were able to, get multiple studios kind of clicking along with that design approach, and producing several games that, at least for me, that I found enjoyable. Like I loved Assassin's Creed through where it started to the arc of where it got to. People can have an argument that it got to be too much, but during the time that they were pumping those things out, I had a lot of fun with Assassin's Creed games. I really love the Division franchise. So that I give them a lot of credit for. By the same token, I think Sony kind of took that near linear wide path approach and really kind of perfected it. And again, got multiple studios who were able to kind of perform and put out good quality content around that framework. But the thing that I've always said, and I've been saying this for 3 generations, so I know some people will pop up and act like, again, I'm like a lot of other people who are just saying this now. What I've said is, look, and it's why I say that Xbox is my preferred platform as a gamer over Sony. If you're, I'm a person who's never been super hyped about the third-person action-adventure kind of format. I've always preferred first-person shooters, racing games. I'm a big flight sim person, yada yada yada. So if you like that, then the Sony platform does really well by you. But if that's not your meat and potatoes, then I don't know that it is. And I've always felt that there are certain aspects to that design pattern that have some ragged edges to it. Just for me personally as a gamer, and so I'm not saying this as an indictment to Sony. There are several things that come along with that. There's there's arbitrary environmental constraints, which is just a big pet peeve of mine as a gamer. And what I mean by that is I can mantle over this box, but then when I go to this box that's the exact same height, the exact same physical characteristics as the other box, I can't mantle that box. Right? Just because the developers decided arbitrarily that that was an obstacle that you couldn't surmount to go into a different area.
So, Ham, real quick,
yeah,
man.
Go ahead.
And this is what you're describing is kind of what some of the issues I had with God of War, Ragnarok, where it's like I have this big axe, I can smash through other things. And where I need to go is right below me, and I can't get through there, and I can't. All of a sudden, I just can't smash through that object. You know what I mean? Like that's like I just, and now I'm forced to figure out a puzzle or to open a door, and like that kind of stuff. Like it gives you that sense of open worldness, but it's not because it's that linear path. But that is kind of the frustration I have, and I didn't feel it as much, I don't think, with Horizon Forbidden West as I did with Elden Ring, or not Elden Ring, with God of War Ragnarok. But there were instances in God of War Ragnarok, and even like The Last of Us, where I felt like, well, geez, like if I'm in the real world, I would just open this door. You know what I mean? I wouldn't have to go about this roundabout way to get to where I want to go.
Right, and The Last of Us 2 definitely suffered from that. So look, as I say that it's gonna struggle. People are gonna struggle to understand the interpretation, right? I am not saying that that's bad game design. I understand the purpose and the intent of those design choices because at the end of the day, right, the path may be wider, but they're still trying to cordon and funnel you down in a specific direction, right? And they're not giving you the freedom, right? And again, that causes a problem for me personally as a gamer, right? Now, when I go play Miles Morales, for the most part, that's still there. It's a really skinny vestige, and in the presentation format doesn't cause you to hit those obstructions, except like incredibly rarely. Like I would say it's like at a single percentage point, right? You feel largely like that's an open world game, and for the most part, it is.
And I would say Horizon Forbidden West is that same feeling too.
Yeah. So again, this isn't me saying Sony makes bad games. This is me saying there's a specific design pattern and a specific framework and a specific design approach and motif that doesn't sync with me perfectly as a gamer, right? And so for me, right, I'm not a person who has been these Sony games are the be all end all. They're the template for everything because I've found them limiting in the way that I personally approach games. And so what I think, what I am adding now to that consistent diatribe though is now, and the questions I've been bringing up are, and Dr. Mo on Twitter and I kind of we're kind of going back and forth on this and kind of talking about it. What I think has occurred, and this is just kind of a preliminary hypothesis, I think we have to see this unfold, is because God of War Ragnarok is such a big game, and because it landed where it landed in the year, with all the dynamics that surrounded that, with games moving out of the way to give God of War Ragnarok breathing room, right? With the way that it was kind of the only really big game with a big splash of its magnitude that's coming out in this quarter. And I know Callisto Protocol is coming and people are looking forward to that, and Need for Speed is out and there are people who are looking for that. But in terms of like a mainstream game that just kind of has eaten all of the headlines, that to me is God of War Ragnarok. Even myself, as I play that game, and I love God of War 2018. I love the pivot in difference in approach towards that game. I enjoyed it when I played, part of it on PlayStation 5. I enjoyed it even more so in terms of its graphical fidelity on PC. I think it's a great game. I think God of War Ragnarok is a great game, but God of War Ragnarok, because of the immense size that that game occupies on the horizon, does things that cause me to ask questions, right? QuickTime events, right? Moving trees arbitrarily for no real gameplay reason, right? That really, other than kind of, um, stepping you through the next in stone, I guess, of the narrative, maybe. But again, I'm not mentioning anything new. I mentioned them with Red Dead Redemption 2 when it came out, right? It bugged the hell out of me that, given the long trail and thread of the onboarding, that part of that was for me to stop to and repair a wagon wheel back on a stagecoach, right? Which, it's not a skill down any kind of progressive skill tree, right? It's like it was just a time suck, right? For no reason. The difference there is, it was part of them trying to immerse you in the world of the Old West. With God of War Ragnarok being a total fantasy setting, mundane things of that nature didn't ground me and make me feel more immersed in a mythological Norse realm, right? And again, this is not me saying that the game's bad. This is me saying, a game of that magnitude that stands alone, head and shoulders above everything else around it, when it has some kind of, tattered edges, right, to its clothing, that causes you to look at that, right, and ask questions. And I think it's causing us to ask questions not solely about Ragnarok. And again, I'm really trying to super emphasize. I do think that game is one of the two best games of the year. Um, I think it's causing us to ask questions like, "Hey, great game, but look, what's coming next down the pipe?" Right? I think there's a lot of conversation and volume around. There are some things that we want to see that are different, right? We want to, and this is about artistic evolution, and we want to see, I hate to use the term innovation because it gets used so much, but I think there's an argument going on that we want to see some different approaches to game design, even out of PlayStation Studios, and particularly about PlayStation Studios, because if there's an argument that they're the best, then you kind of start expecting the best to kind of lead the way on what is the next wave of thing, that everyone's going to fall in love with.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point, Hap. I mean, I think, again, this is, this is kind of an interesting conversation because, a lot of people have, many of us have praised Sony for these games, and look, and they're great games. Like I don't get me wrong. They're the best at what they do. This type of presentation design of that, narrative driven, single player campaign, the third person, like they no one does it as good as they do. But for me, after playing God of War Ragnarok, and I'm still playing it, but it did make me think, like, I would like to see some new innovations in gaming, because a lot of these things that I'm seeing are things that are designs that are pre 2018, that aren't necessarily new, and I'd like to see some things differently. And again, I'm trying to figure out like how to best articulate that, but I just the QTE stuff and just some of the puzzles, like, and I get it. Some of the live chats said they've always been part of the God of War games, and that's fine. But I don't know. Like I just felt like maybe it being a little more open world, less restrictive. And that goes back to what my love for Elden Ring was, that it didn't do anything revolutionary per se for game design, because it's open world, but it did for that franchise. By introducing this new design element and introducing open world to Elden Ring. So,
yeah, I mean, a couple of comments in chat. Jeff B. Playtale Requiem did the same thing God of War did gameplay wise. I don't see the complaint. So Jeff B. You've been around chat. You've been around chat since I came on the show. I'm comfortable that I don't care about what brand label thing has on it when I make my comments. The reason I'm not talking about Plague Tale Requiem is because of what I just said. Plague Tale Requiem does not occupy the space on the horizon and is not the marquee title that's occupying that space right now. Right? If Starfield were out, it had ragged edges around it and caused me to question where artistic design and where artistic evolution is heading in the industry, because that title is an example that everyone is looking at, then I would be talking about Starfield. But I'm not talking about Microsoft games because, quite frankly, as I've said 99 bajillion times on this show, Microsoft has a problem with their production pipeline, and they don't have any AAA games that are out right now. So, I mean, if you need me to insult Microsoft, then that's my insult, that I don't have a game that they've put out to talk about that, shows good design choices or bad design choices. Sergeant says it's also a design choice. Can't ask, for example, Diablo to change camera or more pigs, not farms of Mobos to get XP, build a skill tree. So Sergeant 12, that is exactly what I am saying. What I am saying is that when there's a design pattern, right? When there's a design framework, when there's a template that people are working from, when there's a basic architecture, and this applies to my own designs, right? Of business intelligence software, right? When I put people inside of a box, you're absolutely right. I can't expect my designers to make design choices that exceed the boundaries and the guide rails that I've prescribed within the architecture. In fact, quite frankly, we have some scathing conversations that I damn well demand that they don't do that, because that's not the relationship between architecture and design. But that's my point. My point is that if that architectural framework, if that notional design pattern has been around for 3 console generations now, then what I'm saying is that there is a question, there's a conversation that is probably worthwhile having to say, is now the point where we should look at evolving, right, the art in a different direction.
Yeah. Real quick, Borbor, it's not Elden Ring bias, sir. Borbor was listening, man.
Yeah, and I mean, and I see Borbor's point. I think you've been trying to articulate this. I think we agree. Like, I don't think Elden Ring did anything new from a design pattern. To me,
no, I just said that, Ham. I said, look, it didn't introduce any new gameplay design elements, but it did. But here's the thing, though. It took what makes Souls games great. That because Souls is very influenced by Dungeons and Dragons, and took and those complex boss battles and or those hard boss battles and these epic the music and everything, and it threw it in an open world setting, and it said have at it. And they also introduced a horse that that will help you traverse, which is kind of interesting. I wasn't sure when I first saw that how I'd feel about the horse, but it worked very well. And obviously Elden Ring's not the first game to introduce a horse as a way to traverse through the map. But that being said, but it did something different for that franchise, and that's kind of what I'm saying with God of War, and what I appreciate about God of War 2018. But I think my only complaint with Ragnarok is that I maybe that next step, or whatever that next step is, I think I would have liked to see them do that the way they took that next step with 2018.
Yeah,
and again, that's not to say. I'm sorry, Ham. That's not to say that God of War Ragnarok's bad. I mean, if you heard me earlier, I was saying, like, in terms of storytelling and writing, I mean, it's a really solid game. Like, it's one of the best adventures I've been on in a game where you have this great dynamic between father and son, and these complex emotions between these two individuals. And just a great sense of urgency and fear and maybe it actually really resonated because I'm a father, and so there's elements of that as Kratos is a father, and if you played the other God of Wars previous to Kratos being I should say previous being a father, because he was a father in the previous God of War games, and unfortunately was tricked into killing his wife and his child. And by the way, nobody say spoilers, because that happened a long time ago. so he had that sense of loss. But this is a little bit different though. Like he's in some ways more like settled down, I guess. But there's some feelings here that resonated with me as a parent that I thought was really well done by Sony Santa Monica. And I don't know if that was done on purpose, but if you're a parent, to be able to write something that would resonate with those individuals, and I would guess to resonate with the people who aren't parents, but for me, again, it resonated with me because I'm a father, and that sense of fear you have for your child, and trying to, in Kratos' case, train him, raise him, if you will, to survive without him. So anyhow, that's my rant. But go ahead, Hamp. I'm sorry about it. Interrupted.
No. I feel the same way. Look, the great thing about the pivot, starting in God of War 2018 and kind of culminating here in God of War Ragnarok, is that it took the old formula, which was just really just a bunch of testosterone, the Incredible Hulk style kind of action about somebody who was angry all the time. And I think bringing Christopher Judge in, who is just absolutely one of my favorite character actors, and adding there's definitely a ton of kind of nuanced narrative right in storytelling, incredibly nuanced narrative and storytelling that are brought into God of War 2018 right and extend till now. So those elements are. As the whole packages are head and shoulders above, anything else really that's kind of out on the market. So, it's a good total package, right, through and through. It's just, I think it invites some questions and discussions that should be had kind of about game design and approach.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree, Hap. Let me grab the super chat from Victor Alstein before we wrap up the show here. Victor with a $5 super chat. Thank you, Victor. Says, do you think publishers could adopt SC's ideas of having the platforms pay for game development, in essence, change how games are made? What do you think, Amp?
I'm not sure. Victor, if you could maybe drop some more, kind of expand on that topic a little. I'm not sure if that is. One of the things I saw come across my windshield today was that. Maybe it was that Sony had put money in the game on finishing up the development of Callisto Protocol, or maybe it was a different title.
I'm sure. Sony had invested in providing some manpower, about 150 something devs.
Yeah, I think, and again, Victor, if we're not getting at it, please feel free to expand on the thing. But yeah, look, regardless of whether it's Sony or Microsoft or Apple or Google or anyone, right? And in fact, I'm dealing with this current problem on a project that I have now. Look, anybody who puts skin in the game from a monetary perspective now gets a seat at the table, right? And is a stakeholder and gets to have a voice, right, in final product that's the output. So. Those relationships exist now in game development. I think maybe there's a bit more ado about them in the headlines now, but it's always been the case, and we've talked about it here on the show before. The publisher developer relationship is sometimes just a monetary one, where I just fund you to go build. You come to me, pitch me a game, I agree that I'm going to pay for it. And then you get milestone payments, hopefully typically based on performance and output, from the start of production through the end. But sometimes that relationship is a little more symbiotic. That was the case, I think, with Stray. But there's sometimes that there's a more symbiotic relationship where the publisher, sometimes they provide the infrastructure, or they provide the development environment, or they provide the QA testers, right? Or there's. I'm trying to figure out how to best explain this. There's development teams from the publisher that work on a specific component of the game, right? And those things have kind of always existed. I think in in the pattern that we're going to see of greater mass consolidation in the industry. I think we're going to see more of those kind of symbiotic relationships that are going to culminate in acquisitions. Like a lot of these studios that Sony has bought that are startups. Like Jade Raymond's company, like the guys. I think is the guys who were part of Destiny 2 and were maybe originally part of Infinity Ward. I think you're going to see involvement from Sony studios in those games, as far as providing some input, whether they be test infrastructure, you know, development a part of the game, maybe in order to shorten up the timeline to port those games to PC or things of that nature. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No. Absolutely. All right, Hamp. It is 11 o'clock. I want to get. Like I said, I'm still playing God of War Ragnarok, doing some of the missions I didn't tackle when I was playing through, and there's some things that have kind of opened up. So I want to get to that, but Victor just answered you here, Hamp.
Yeah, I'm still. I apologize, Victor. Maybe I'm being dense. So, tailor games to each platform's service or strategy, like the lines seem to be drawn from them before. So yes. I mean, I think those scenarios have existed before. I do agree with you that as the service models and business models for the platform holders become more differentiated, right? As Microsoft kind of goes down the path more so of games as a service, which harmonizes a lot more so with the Game Pass model. I think you could definitely see a developer who took their game and tailored it right to more so easily lend itself to the game as a service model. And that could come out of negotiations and discussions with Microsoft. So yeah, I could definitely see that. I don't think that we would see, a single developer who's making a multi-platform game that, diverge that skew and say, hey, the Xbox version is going to lend itself more so to Game Pass, right, in some design approach, versus the PlayStation version, which is going to be slightly different.
Thank you, Ham, for answering this question, man. I appreciate it. Look, everyone, we're going to call it a night, but Ham, I may want to revisit this conversation about Sony first party, man. Yeah, I may want to revisit this, maybe on a BRAP rant, but anyhow, look, I want to give a big shout out to everyone in the live chat. Thank you, everyone, for coming out and hanging out with us this evening. Please do be solid, hit the like button, and if you're new to the show, consider subscribing, hitting the bell notification, so you're alerted when we go live. Hey, let us, if you want Hamp and I to talk a little bit more about inflation, let us know.
Yeah, maybe that might be a better idea than our political podcast.
Well, I think that would tie into the political podcast.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, Hamp and I are toying with the idea of, am I ever going to do videos, Victor? Probably not. I don't have time to do it. That's the problem. I don't have time to sit in front of a camera, do a video, edit, and all that. I just don't have time to do it. It's easier for me to. Yeah, see, Gogo posted, yeah, more Bloomberg talk. maybe we could call it Bratberg or Bloombrap. I don't know. Anyhow, but yeah, Victor, I probably won't do videos, man. I've done some videos before, but it just, I'm assuming you say videos like on camera. Yeah, I just don't have time to do it. But anyhow, yeah, thank you, everyone, for tuning in live with us. Appreciate it. Thank you to anyone who is going to watch the show later on. But Hamp, always a pleasure, man. Let everyone know where they can find you.
Yeah, if you want to swing by the E2KG Network podcasting channel on YouTube to watch the Enough to Keep Going weekly games podcast, We do that show on Sunday nights. We try to hit about 8:45 p.m. But sometimes we run a little late for technical issues. So I would say between 8:45 and 9. So feel free to swing by. You get some kind of financial talk, kind of like we've talked about here, but we do finance, tech perspectives and economic perspectives, but that's maybe half of the show, maybe less. The rest of the show is us talking about our current gameplay experiences and whatever games we're playing. So typically, out of the cast of 3, we will typically talk anywhere from 3 to 9 games that we currently have in rotation. And again, talk about kind of the gameplay elements of those, the artistic approaches, how they resonate with us, the campaign structure, things of that nature. So feel free to stop by.
Absolutely. No, thank you, Hap. I appreciate that, man. And everyone, have a great rest of the week, by the way. And we'll be back next Wednesday. I got to do another BRAP rant, man. I've just been so busy, Hamp, but I got to figure something out. So try to do a BRAP rant sometime soon, but just need to figure out the time and everything. So anyhow. All right, everyone. We're out. Have a great rest of the week. We'll catch you next week.